Okay, well, 25-minute monologue might be a bit much for people to bear. So, despite the comments on no Q&As, if there's themes, what I'll try and do is talk for maybe 12, 15 minutes. And then if there are themes and topics that's of particular interest to the audience, if there's a way of conveying that to me, I can attempt to use that as a feedback loop to pause and keep things more pertinent and relevant to what the audience would like to do. So I can change that if there's a mechanism for doing so. I'll take a break. Like I say, it's around 12, 13 minutes. A hydration break as per the football analogy now. Well, first of all, I'm going to break all best practice presentation techniques and apologize for not being there with you today. And the reason I want to apologize is because you are an incredibly important community, and I was really keen to come up and talk to you and see and get an update of all the amazing work that you're doing. Of the times I have been able to come up and join you, I've been incredibly impressed at the thought, the passion, the drive, the purpose, at everything that's going. And the reason why that's important to the program for CCUS is I see you as a community as really leading the vanguard of two very important dimensions for us. That is, one, the efficacy and efficiency of the underlying technology itself and the innovation of the processes in and around it for the whole system to operate as efficiently and effectively as possible. And I'll come back to why I see that's important. And two is, much like a lot of the UK, we have incredible research development and innovation, and we're able to commercialize that by developing the technology and innovations and processes and systems to an extent where we can then commercialize that by exporting that to other countries and indeed helping them on their next stage of their net zero journeys, which despite the headwinds that we are facing globally, which again I'll touch on, will come round to the same conclusion that the UK has come through to, that carbon capture is essential for net zero. And the UK has led previous global industrial revolutions, as you'll know. Unfortunately, it had the byproduct of carbonizing the world alongside it, I think unknowingly at the time, and the particular implications back then. And there's still sections of the future industrial setup and architecture, including the hard to abate decarbonisation, such as carbon capture and hydrogen, where the UK has a comparative advantage. And as well as helping decarbonise the other countries as well as the UK, we can get a commercial return, which is a fair return for the taxpayers and the bill payers of the UK, who are funding what's still relatively early stage technology, and therefore slightly more expensive technology than nth of a kind technology. And so, you as a community, I see as the real vanguard of both of those things. Like I say, the efficacy and efficiency, trying to drive the costs of this technology down such that for the pounds that we are able to persuade either consumers preferably, and if not bill payers and taxpayers where required, as in our current setup and a lot of the business models, to drive that cost down so we can buy more low carbon watts in the power generation and more megatons in the decarbonisation of the hard to abate industrial and other sectors that carbon capture applies to. And it's really through that combination of driving that cost down and then adding that export and creating of the jobs. Some of you who may have seen me online have heard me use the phrase, we're in the business of creating mega jobs through delivering megawatts and megatons of abatement of CCUS, and that's what we're really here striving to do. And the UK really does have an opportunity and a comparative advantage. And you, like I say, are the cornerstone of this. So that, whilst that sounds like a long-winded apology, in that it also sort of shows where you sit in the the overall value system and the importance of how we're framing the carbon capture program. As we're going through, you'll all be very averse and familiar with the progress that we've made to date, and the economic framework and the legislative and regulatory framework that we have around it. For those who may have remembered, we did publish a CCUS vision way back in the end of 2023, which still holds. Good visions do have longevity and a long shelf life. Where we are looking to still go through a 3-part transition. One, with this market establishment that we're in now, we've got the FIDs with ECC and HyNet, and credit to the government, took a high degree of risk in getting those FIDs forward. For the first time ever, government had taken a FID decision with an open judicial review challenge on a planning decision on ECC, and thankfully we were able to sort of manage that through. We respect the people who took that challenge and their different of opinions, but we respectfully disagree with them, and thankfully from our perspective, those decisions went through. And so that very significant risk that we took on behalf of the taxpayer was a good one, and we were able to get an FID through. And again, you'd have noticed on the Liverpool Bay, on the HyNet side, we were able to take a decision with different from our original intention of having at least 2 capture projects in the network taking FID simultaneously with the transport and storage system of Liverpool Bay. We took an FID, and therefore a significant risk potentially of the so-called white elephant of having a network but no users for it. Subsequently, again, the confidence in taking that risk paid off, as we've been able to subsequently take FIDs with Padeswood and Protos, and working incredibly hard to still get agreements for further users both in ECC and HyNet clusters. And the framework for that is what we are using and referring to as the market establishing, but a lot of that is coming through, as you know, through bill payers and taxpayers. In that vision statement, we paint out, and still valid, and we're still trying to work towards it, through a market transition stage where the transfer of risk between public and private sector shifts more into the private sector, as us as citizens of the world and the UK are willing to demand and pay for the lowest carbon route to the products and services that the CCUS technology can decarbonize in those industries that we're all familiar with. And then eventually right the way through to what we call a self-sufficient and self-sustaining market and CCUS industry, whereby the hand of government is a lot less prevalent. And again, where we as citizens are willing to demand and pay for, like I say, the lowest cost carbon for the products and services that we want. And again, that protects jobs in those industries in the UK, where we're working that through, as well as creates the new jobs of the supply chain, both here in the UK and internationally. We're working incredibly hard with the EU on a reset, as you know, with this government. With that, there is obviously the discussion on linking the emissions trading schemes of the EU back with the UK. And so in order to have that reset, we'll need to recommit to that emissions trading, and likelihood of CO2 costs increasing, and therefore industries having to pay that price for emissions. So there comes a point where that becomes inoperable, and decarbonising becomes the only economic choice in order to retain those industries, which we're so keen to retain, as well as building the extra jobs on top. And working incredibly hard internationally as well to work with countries who also have a policy which is pro carbon capture, such that the talents that you all have and the companies who are working and building the technology can go and help them do that as well. So this is I'll last sort of comment I'll make, and then sort of pause to see what themes people would like to explore. The call to arms really from all of us, who I sort of describe as the 10,000 people working in the UK on carbon capture across the many different areas that we're working on. We are seen as the world's leading sort of policy instrumentation and mechanisms for doing it. The strategy of deployment that we're working through the clusters is seen as good. And what we've done is seen as good, but we haven't stored any CO2 yet. This isn't operable yet, and what we have achieved today is not the limit of our ambition. We're keen, and we see the necessity for doing much more. You will have heard Nigel Topping, the chairman of the Committee for Climate Change, across the board on the climate agenda. The UK government needs to be moving faster. And the point, my call to arms bit is that I think we need to rally and show active participation in the demand for low carbon products and services. We as the citizens are not really showing that. There are a lot of soft signals. The example I cite for the travel industry in flights, it's very easy to scroll down when booking a flight and do a carbon offset. It's not a particularly effective carbon offset, admittedly, but it's a very low cost one. And less than 1% of all air passengers elect to do that. More secure carbon offsetting through the permanent storage of carbon capture and storage is more expensive than those flight options down. But we as citizens aren't doing that, and so whilst the government needs to lead on these things, a democratic government can only get so far ahead of its citizens rather than forcing and imposing things on it. And the debate on net zero is certainly the fors and the againsts are much more prevalent at the moment. And so I think those who are in the pro camp, of which I am, need to really sort of show that and rally the demand for people to get through, such that when the governments are doing their next spending review, the next one will be 2027, and the next sort of allocation of money, the citizens have voted as to what they want to see, and the distribution of the resources, the public resources, and how they're put through into where they should go, into the many, many demanding and well-deserving public services that we have, and sort of show where net zero sort of fits into that prioritization. And that's where we as the citizens need to sort of get through and show the politicians and the governments of the day what it is that we want, so that they can give that to us rather than impose it on us. So for me, I'll sort of wrap up in a second. There's only two questions, I think, to do with net zero, and this relates to carbon capture in what I see as the benefits of mega jobs, megawatts, megatons. Is it affordable, and is it deliverable? There is some debate about the deliverability within carbon capture. Hopefully everyone there in the room is working incredibly hard to demonstrate why and how it's deliverable. Will it be perfect? No, nothing is. But in my view, it's demonstrably deliverable. In my view, it's demonstrably affordable. There's enough money in the world, but we are choosing to spend it on different things. And so it's a willingness to spend on this thing. So, I think in addition to the good work we're doing on the deliverability and the effectiveness and efficacy of it, and the technology and research and systems within it, we need to do more to demonstrate people that this is affordable. Again, you heard from the government why it's working so hard on the growth agenda, such that people feel that they can get through cost of living and have enough money to sort of pay the early stage investment into things like carbon capture for us to get a later return with one lower cost adaptation. Prevention is always cheaper than cure. Mitigation is always cheaper than adaptation. So there's a cost return to invest now to get the return later, as well as then the traditional high carbon economics through jobs creation through exporting and trade. So yeah, that's my sort of call to arms, really, sort of get people working on showing the growth potential from this technology, as well as continuing to work on the deliverability. Mel, I'll pause there and just see if there are sort of themes that people would like me to touch on with where I can.
Not Mel, it's Jen here. But Mel,
sorry, Jen.
Just no, because I know you can't see me. Thank you so much, and I do want to just say thank you hugely as well for such complimentary remarks to UKCCSRC coming from yourself, Alex. You co-lead the DESNZ program for CCUS. It really is fantastic to hear. I'm sorry you missed out on this morning's presentations, where we focused a lot on exactly that question of deliverability, scalability. I want to assure you we've been tackling questions of effectiveness, efficacy, affordability, deliverability. So we've been discussing all the right questions, I think. One hand shot up straight away is Owen Tucker. It needs to be very much on this theme, so it's not a question, it's just what would you like Alex to expand upon? I would value, so Alex, it should be that if we give Owen the microphone, you should be able to hear him. So just 1 second.
Thank you. Hi, can you hear me, Alex?
Yes.
Yes, brilliant. So the theme is increasing our decarbonising at scale. Now, one of the questions that was asked earlier was about the loss of industry, the decarbonisation that's happening as industry closes down. In Europe, we've seen policy mechanisms around the carbon border adjustment mechanism, which, of course, is reducing the subsidy levels and making people more likely to decarbonise and keep industry in Europe, and of course drive CCS. Are we seeing traction, themes, elements around that coming through in Britain?
Yes, no, there's certainly a lot of discussion and consultation on carbon border adjustment mechanism in and around the UK. I think that helps. Is one of the instruments, along with the sort of CFD instruments that we have in carbon capture, which, in my view, is part of the transition from what we have as a high carbon economy to a low carbon economy. We have a market failure where we as society don't value economically the optimum amount of CO2 in the atmosphere, the common good curse, so to speak. And so, I think carbon border adjustment is a mechanism for helping fix that market failure and to allow the market to operate in what I call the new low carbon paradigm. So there's certainly a lot of work going on within the UK around that. It's again something that's necessary but not easy, and so people are working on that as hard and as fast as they can. I mean, the other point I was going to make, I guess, touching on the headwinds, if all of us sort of stopped and thought from, let's say, 2015 Paris Accord, net zero 1.5 through to 2050 globally delivered, would be a nice, neat, smooth, straight, increased line. I think if we stopped and thought about that, we'd sort of realise that it would probably have some bumps and obstacles ahead. Right now we are into some global headwinds, for sure, with different people having different views either about the necessity at all of net zero or the solutions and mechanisms for doing it. There are a lot of people who don't believe that carbon capture is either proven or can work or is high enough priority, etc. So certainly the intention through the business models and carbon border adjustments, etc., is to decarbonize before deindustrializing from the country. That certainly has even in the high carbon traditional economics, economic sense to do so. And that's what we're working incredibly hard to try and achieve. And I think with that, and Europe again holding the bastion on the ETS and carbon border adjustments, etc., and being such a big consumer market, bigger than the UK clearly, and you combine the two, right now I think becomes the bastion of defending the cause and necessity of net zero by incentivizing countries to decarbonize in order to trade with them, and using the existing capital markets in the mechanisms for doing so. So I think there's a lot of work in consultation and thought and design around what a UK carbon border adjustment mechanism might include, as well as other mechanisms as we move towards that self-sustaining market.
Thanks, Alex. I'm just making a decision about whether we can accept another question. We've got a hand up over there. We did have a hand up over there. It's all the storage folks that want to ask questions. So let's hand over to Nick. Nick's sat at the back. Purely, Stuart, because I think we'll have it. So let's see how quick we can be.
Yeah, I'll keep brief. I thought it was mostly capture folks in the room anyway. Okay, Alex, Nick Terrell from Carbon Catalyst. You know as well, of course. You mentioned the Reset Summit. Great that that's hopefully happening soon. Fantastic. You also mentioned the policies there and other policies beyond the carbon border adjustment mechanism. What are your thoughts and the department's thoughts on the EU's innovative Net Zero Industry Act and how that could maybe move across the meeting line and play a role in the UK's energy transition pathway, particularly around CCS and the oil and gas mandates that we're seeing within the EU member states? Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Phrase that how you need to, Alex.
Yeah. I'll have a look. I'm not sure I'm sufficiently qualified and competent to do that. I sort of raised it up a level, I guess, in terms of working closely with the EU and in a period of co-opetition, right, where we need to cooperate, but also just like I was talking about the mega jobs that the UK wants to create, the EU also wants to use the pivot to net zero to help their industries and to do that. And there's sort of different mechanisms that they're using and we're using. There'll be some places where we'll want to align. It makes sense to do so. Let's say, what is a low carbon product standard? What defines that? Easy to say, harder to define in order to get through a carbon border mechanism, for example. And there'll be areas where we might want to compete and differentiate. I know there's a lot of eyes from the EU onto the mechanisms that we've done in order how we've distributed the risk between public and private, and equally there's some good things in their tool set that we'll want to borrow as well. So I think the collaboration in what I would call a co-opetition mechanism will continue.
Thank you very much, Alex. I think what I'll do is I'll call it time there, because that gives 5 minutes to wrap up and then head down to lunch. So thanks so much for sharing that. It's great to have 2 questions there, really talking about that. Internationalisation, co-opetition, I've not really heard that phrase before, Alex. I'm going to be taking that one away. In terms of the Net Zero Industry Act and also CBAM. So those were questions I was keen to ask. So it's great that they were asked by the audience as well. And I should also explain that, the audience is a lot of capture people. There's a few storage people. They were all the ones who had their hands up just then. So know that we want to chat more.
I'll just say again, thank you for everything that you do. This is a mission incredibly important, and you guys are incredibly important to it. The trains just defeated me yesterday. I tried again this morning. There's a number of things that I needed to be in different places for, and if ever the weather showed that we need to be working even faster together, then this week and shows that adaptation is way more expensive than prevention. So let's crack on with it, and thank you for everything that you're doing.